Tractate Parah, General Introduction. Tractate Parah deals with the laws regarding to the Parah Aduma, red cow, whose ashes are used to purify people or utensils that become tame from a human corpse. This form of tuma is known as tumat mace, and a person or utensil that has tumas mace is called a tame mace. The tractate teaches how the Parah Aduma was prepared and how it was used for purifying a person or a utensil that became tame from a corpse. Part 1. Those who require purification with the ashes of the Parah Aduma. The highest degree of tuma is that of a human corpse. A human corpse is known as a avi avos hatuma, literally, father of a father of tuma. A person who becomes tame from a human corpse becomes an avatuma, literally, father of tuma. A person who becomes tame from an avatuma becomes a rishon latuma, first degree of acquired tuma. Someone who became tame from a corpse must undergo the 7-day purification process only if he is an avatuma. If he is just a rishon latuma, for example, he touched a person who had touched a corpse, he does not need to be sprinkled. He could simply immerse himself in a mikvah on the day he became tame and become fully tahor at nightfall. See Bamidbar, chapter 19, verse 22. Part 2, the Parah Aduma. A. Qualifications of the Parah Aduma. The Torah describes the Parah Aduma as a completely red cow, which is without blemish, and upon which a yoke has not come. Bamidbar, chapter 19, verse 2. This verse states several requirements for the Parah Aduma. These are: A. It must be completely red. In certain circumstances, as few as 2 hairs that are the same color, other than red, disqualify a Parah Aduma. See chapter 2, Mishnah 5. B. It must be a cow, i.e. an adult cow, as opposed to a calf. For this reason, it has to be at least in its 3rd year, i.e. 2 years old, because that is when it is no longer considered a calf, but rather an adult cow. See chapter 1, Mishnah 1. C. It must be without blemish. Any physical blemish that disqualifies a korban disqualifies a Parah Aduma as well. See chapter 2, Mishnah 3. These blemishes are listed in Vayikra chapter 22, verses 22 through 24, and in Bechoros chapter 6. D. It must be a cow upon which a yoke has not come. If a Parah Aduma had carried a yoke or done any type of work, it is disqualified. See chapter 2, Mishnah 3. B. The sanctity of the Parah Aduma. Unlike korbanos, whose service is performed in the Beis Hamikdash, the Parah Aduma is slaughtered and burned outside the Beis Hamikdash, as described below. Therefore, the Parah Aduma does not have the sanctity of a korban. Rather, it has the sanctity of things set aside for the maintenance of the Beis Hamikdash. See Yoma 42a. On the other hand, the Torah states regarding the Parah Aduma, it is a chatas, Bamidbar chapter 19, verse 19, which teaches that the Parah Aduma is a type of chatas offering. That is, in certain respects, the laws of the Parah Aduma are like the laws of chatas offerings and other korbanos. See Yoma 42a, Avodah Zarah 23b. For this reason, some of the factors that make an animal unfit to be offered as a korban also make a red cow unfit to be used as a Parah Aduma. See chapter 2, Mishnah 3. Part 3, the preparation of the Parah Aduma. A. Description of the service. The Parah Aduma is slaughtered and burned in a service that takes place on the Mount of Olives, to the east of Jerusalem. See chapter 3, Mishnah 6. 7 days before the service, the Kohen appointed to burn the Parah is taken from his house and brought to a room in the Beis Hamikdash where he stays until the service takes place. During these 7 days, he is sprinkled with mei chatas, just in case he had become tame with corpse tuma beforehand. See chapter 3, Mishnah 1. After these 7 days, the Parah Aduma is brought to the Mount of Olives, where it is bound with ropes and placed on the pile of wood for a fire, and then slaughtered. A Kohen receives some of the blood in his hand and sprinkles it 7 times toward the entrance of the Heichal, the main building of the Beis Hamikdash. The pyre is then lit. Once the flames take hold of most of the Parah's body, and its body splits open from the heat, a Kohen throws a bundle consisting of cedar wood, stalks of an azov plant, and a strip of wet red wool into the body of the cow. The Parah Aduma is left on the pyre until it is completely burned to ashes. See chapter 3, Mishnahs 9, 10, and 11. The ashes are collected and divided into 3 portions. One portion is placed in the Beis Hamikdash for safekeeping, as required by the verse in Bamidbar chapter 19, verse 9, "It shall be for the assembly of Israel as safekeeping." A second portion is reserved for the purification of Kohanim from corpse tuma, and the third portion is reserved for the purification of other people from corpse tuma. See chapter 3, Mishnah 11. B. Other laws of the service. Almost all the steps of the Paraduma service must be performed by a Kohen. See chapter 4, Mishnah 4. The Kohen has to wear the 4 garments that ordinary Kohanim wear when performing the temple service. See chapter 4, Mishnah 1. Even a Kohen Gadol, who normally wears 8 garments, must wear only these 4 garments when performing the Paraduma service. See Rambam Hilchos Paraduma 1:12. The Kohen also must wash his hands and feet before performing the Paraduma service, in the same manner as a Kohen before performing the temple service does. See chapter 4, Mishnah 1. There is a biblical requirement that the person who is involved in the Paraduma service guard the Paraduma from Tumah. A live animal cannot become Tameh. Once it is slaughtered, however, the Paraduma can become Tameh, and should it become Tameh, it is disqualified. If the person diverts his attention for even a moment from protecting the Paraduma, the service is invalid. See Yoma 42a and b, Chazan Ish, Parah 7:9. The service is also invalid if someone performing one of the procedures engages in a different activity at the same time. See chapter 4, Mishnah 4. The participants in the service must be tahor, as the verse in Bamidbar chapter 19, verse 9 states, "A tahor person shall gather the ash of the parah." The verse does not mention other parts of the service, but since the paraduma is called a chatas, verse 19 there, its service must be performed by tahor people just like the service of all korbanos. See Rashi, Yoma 43a and Yevama 73a. However, there is an important difference between the paraduma and korbanos in that a tevel yom is disqualified from performing the service of korbanos. See Zavachim, chapter 2, Mishnah 1. But he may perform the paraduma service. A unique feature of the Paraduma service is that all those who participate in it, from the time the parah is slaughtered until its ashes are gathered, become Tameh themselves as a Rishon L'Tumah. Furthermore, the clothes they are wearing then also become Rishon L'Tumah, as do any utensils they touched at the time. See chapter 4, Mishnah 4. C. Rabbinic precautions against Tumah in the Paraduma service. The sages were particularly strict regarding the Paraduma service. To ensure that the paraduma and the participants in its service do not become tameh, they enacted that only utensils that cannot become tameh, such as utensils made of stone, may be used for the service. See chapter 3, Mishnah 9, note 1. As a unique stringency, the sages also decreed that only people who had never become tameh from a corpse in their lives may prepare the mechatas, that is sprinkled on the Kohen during the 7 days that he is kept in the Beis HaMikdash before the paraduma is prepared. See above. For this purpose, children were born and raised in houses and courtyards that were completely protected from corpse tumah. The sages required all these conditions because they deliberately used a tevel yom for the paraduma service. Concerned that this might lead people to be careless about the tahara of the paraduma and its service, the sages imposed high standards of tahara on all activities related to the paraduma, so that the people would be fully aware of the need for tahara in these matters. See Yoma 2a. Part 4. Parah, aduma, ashes, and mechatas. A. Paraduma ashes. Paraduma ashes must not be allowed to become tameh. If they become tameh, they are invalid to use for mechatas. See chapter 10, Mishnah 3 et al. Paraduma ashes become tameh if they come into contact with any source of tumah. See chapter 11, Mishnah 6. In addition, the ashes are considered tameh even if they are simply placed on top of something tameh. For example, they are in a container that is not subject to tumah, that is placed on top of a source of tumah. See chapter 10, Mishnah 3. The ashes also become disqualified if they are simply left unguarded from exposure to tumah. This is derived from Bamidbar chapter 19, verse 9, which specifies that paraduma ashes be for safekeeping. That is, they must be consciously guarded and protected from tumah. See Rav to Mishnah, chapter 6, Mishnah 1. Thus, the ashes must either be stored in a location where they will not be exposed to tumah, or they must be under constant supervision. If the one supervising the ashes diverts his attention even momentarily from guarding them, they become disqualified. See chapter 6, Mishnah 1. B. Water for mechatas. The Torah in Bamidbar, chapter 19, verse 17, stipulates that the water used for making mechatas, the mixture of paraduma ashes, and water that is sprinkled on the tameh mace to purify him, must be spring water in a utensil. This verse teaches several requirements for the water. 1. It must be spring water. 2. It must be drawn into a utensil that meets the definition of kli, utensil. 3. This verse refers to spring water as mayim chaim, literally living water. This term indicates that it is not enough for the water to have come from a spring. The water must be part of a running, living spring at the moment it is drawn into the kli. Thus, for example, the water may not be drawn from the spring into a pit in the ground and from there into a kli. Water intended for mechatas, like paraduma ashes, must be tahor, and like the ashes, the water becomes disqualified if it is not constantly guarded from exposure to tuma. C. Preparing mechatas. The act of mixing paraduma ashes and spring water to create mechatas is known as sanctification of the water. Rav to Mishnah, chapter 6, Mishnah 1. The Torah in Bamidbar, chapter 19, verse 17, describes the process as follows. They shall take for the tameh some of the ashes of the burning of the chatas, i.e. the paraduma, and put upon it spring water in a utensil. A simple reading of the above verse would suggest that water is placed on top of the ashes, i.e. it is poured over ashes that are already in a vessel. In fact, however, it is the water that must be in the vessel first, and the ashes added afterward. If this order is reversed, the mechatas are disqualified. What the verse means when it describes the water being placed upon the ashes is that once the ashes are added to the water, it should be stirred so that the ashes become mixed with the water. See Sota 16b, Tamura 1:5 with Gemara 12b. Mechatas, like paraduma ashes and water intended for mechatas, must be guarded from tuma, even if it does not become tame. But one merely diverts his attention from guarding it, it becomes disqualified. See Yoma 42b with Rashi. See also chapter 9, Mishnah 4. A unique property of mechatas is that although it purifies a person or utensil from corpse tuma, it also has the ability to make tame any person or utensil that comes into contact with it for any reason that is not related to its intended purpose of sprinkling to purify from corpse tuma. A person or utensil becomes tame if he touches the slightest amount of mechatas, or carries, even without touching directly, an amount sufficient for sprinkling on someone tame from a corpse. If a person carries mechatas, not only he, but also the clothes he is wearing at the same time become tame. See Kalim, chapter 1, Mishnah 2. D. Rabbinical stringencies concerning the paraduma. The rabbis imposed very high standards of tahara with regard to all matters related to the paraduma and mechatas, higher than the standards they required for any other sacred item. According to these standards, every person and utensil is considered tame for paraduma purposes, unless he protects himself or the utensil from tuma for the specific purpose of keeping himself tahor for paraduma purposes. See chapter 10, Mishnahs 1 and 2, and Chagiga chapter 2, Mishnah 7. Even immersing himself in a mikveh does not purify a person or object for paraduma purposes unless he immerses himself or the utensil with the specific intent of purifying himself or the utensil for paraduma purposes. See Chagiga, Mishnah 2, chapter 6. The sages also enacted that regarding the paraduma, tuma does not become weaker, as it normally does, when it is transmitted from one object to another. If a utensil is made tame by an avatuma, and the tame utensil comes into contact with another utensil, and that utensil with another, and so on, all the utensils are considered tame for paraduma purposes. Thus, with regard to the paraduma, the chain of tuma transmission is endless. See chapter 12, Mishnah 8. Part 5, the purification procedure. A. Description of the purification procedure. In order for someone or something tame from a corpse to become tahor, he must undergo a process of purification that lasts 7 days. On the third day of his becoming tame, he is sprinkled with mechatas, and this sprinkling is repeated on the 7th day. The sprinkling is done by dipping the tips of azav stalks into a vessel containing mechatas, see chapter 5, Mishnah 5, and chapter 11, Mishnah 9. The stalks are then taken out, and the mechatas that remains on them is sprinkled on the tame. After the tame is sprinkled on the 7th day, he must immerse himself in a mikveh. The immersion makes him tahor immediately with regard to some matters, but he remains tame as a tevel yom with regard to other matters. At nightfall, he becomes fully tahor. Part 6, paraduma, a mitzvah without an apparent rationale. The laws of the paraduma do not seem to have a reason. Moreover, one aspect of these laws appears to contradict reason, namely the fact that mechatas, which purifies from tuma, makes those who touch it tame, see above. Regarding this last matter, King Solomon, the wisest of all men, wrote in Koheles, chapter 7, verse 23, I said I could become wise, but it is beyond me, see Nida 9a. Indeed, the passage about the paraduma begins with the words in Bamidbar, chapter 19, verse 2, this is the decree of the Torah. The word hok, decree, is used for a law that has no apparent reason. We perform the mitzvah not because it has a reason we understand, but because it is a royal decree from the King of Kings, which we must fulfill without question. See Midrash Tanchuma to the verse cited by Rashi there.